The idea is, what area do you feel like you want to improve? Now, because everything is connected, we know that if you start with the idea of stress, that the other areas will improve, but we don't have to worry about the other areas. Let's just start with one area in stress. You want to improve your stress level. So what could that look like? Well, identify what you want. You want some peace. You don't want to be worrying all the time, right? You want to have some faith that it's all going to work out, whatever it might be. You identify what you want. And then we do the how. Okay, what does that look like? And that might look like taking 3 times a day, taking 2 minutes on deep breath. So it seems so simple. So I really take that same process and I break it down, whether it's food or relationships or patterns of thinking. So whatever it might be, we break it down to a simple action to start with one.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about upgrading our body, mind, and spirit. I'm delighted to welcome Kathleen Klug. Kathleen is an expert in the field of fitness, health, and wellness. She's an author, holistic health coach, health educator, and the founder of KK Health Coaching. You can reach Kathleen at her website, kathleenklug.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Kathleen. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you for having me, Linda.
Oh, this is such a pleasure. And, I think we all want to be healthy, don't we? We want to be healthy, but a lot of times we feel like that's out of reach. And I don't even know where to start. So if I'm feeling that way, can you give me some hope that I can do this?
I can. In fact, I love how your podcast is really about hope, healing, and happiness. And yes, we need hope that we can do our own healing and to get healthy. That is for sure. And it can be a complicated process because our health as integrated beings is connected to our body, mind, and spirit. And that means it's connected to how we eat and how we move and how we think and our beliefs. And because all those move into the results that we have in our life and how we feel about ourselves and our sense of purpose and everything. So yes, the hope that I share is that 1, it's certainly possible. And 2, you can do it. And then the 3 is how you start with 1. That's why my book is called Start with 1. Because that's what and we can all start with 1.
Oh, what a relief. Because when you start and saying, okay, now we're not just talking about our physical health, we're talking about the whole picture. In fact, you talk about integrated wellness and health. So is that what you mean when you're talking about we're not just talking about our physical health? It is the whole thing, because everything affects everything else. So if I'm struggling with stress about my kids or about my finances or about this, it affects the way that I feel. And if I am sick and I have tummy aches all the time, that affects my performance at work. And everything is just connected to everything else. And so then you think, you mean I have to address all of it? Dang. But when you say, let's start with 1, I think I can do 1. So if I'm just going to start with 1, are there some suggestions of a 1 thing that I could do?
I start people out when I work with them with an assessment, like a personal assessment about where they are, what's working well, and then what area do they feel like they want to improve in, that they need more attention and intention to. So in the case of the example that you just brought up, we know that stress like that chronic stress, not the acute stress of just life and things happening, but that acute stress that we can find ourselves living in. We know that is harming us, and really it's killing us as a society, because of the downstream effects, because it affects every part of our body. It affects our cells and how we think and how we drive, right? I mean, literally. So certainly how we show up in life and our relationships and our work. So the idea is, what area do you feel like you want to improve? Now, because everything is connected, kind of like we both just were talking about, we know that if you start with the idea of stress, and I'm just going to use this example that you gave me, that the other areas will improve, but we don't have to worry about the other areas. Let's just start with one area in stress. You want to improve your stress level. So what could that look like? Well, identify what you want. You want some peace. You want to have some, you don't want to be worrying all the time, right? You want to have some faith that it's all going to work out, whatever it might be. You identify what you want. And then we do the how. Okay, what does that look like? And that might look like taking 3 times a day, taking 2 minutes, so 6 minutes a day on deep breath. It might mean a minute or 2 of affirmations a couple times a day, like all is well. I have everything I need. It's going just as it should, whatever the case may be. So what we know though, so it seems so simple, but that can help bring down the stress level, because I'm not suggesting that stress is not real, because it is. It's certainly a real function in our body. Our hormones, our body, each cell responds to stress. But what is stress? Stress is really like a perceived pressure, right? I mean, how driving your kids to school can be stressful. Running late is stressful. Your budget, never going as far as you want, can be stressful. Your relationships at home can be stressful. Your boss everything can be stressful. So does that mean we walk around in stress? No, this is perceived stress. What if we changed our perception about what stress is, knowing that all is well, knowing that you're going to be okay, whatever that might be. So I really take that same process and I break it down, whether it's food or relationships or patterns of thinking. I was just talking to somebody, how you doing? Oh my gosh. And the floodgate of all these problems came. The focus that this person has on her problems is so big, she cannot see what she has, right? And so this is a pattern of thinking. And so whatever it might be, we break it down to a simple action to start with one. And then I also have break down, like, how do we do that? Because when we are trying to bring in new behavior, we have to keep it really in the forefront of our mind, because it's not an automatic thing. We're most likely trying to get rid of or crowd out a habit that is very unconscious, like negative thinking or constantly being stressed in our mind or grabbing the food or whatever it might be. So having anything that we want to bring in, a new behavior, we have to keep at the forefront of our mind. And I do have a how to do that. I walk people through, but that first step is deciding what you want, and then a first step that you can start with.
I love that. Oh, what a beautiful example, and how that applies to every single person. You made it very individual. Let me talk to you. So if I'm talking to Kathleen, or if Kathleen's talking to Linda, what do I want? That's the first step. And then from that first step, breaking it down into, from what I want, how do I get what I want? What is one step that will lead me toward what I want? That feels so manageable, bringing it down into one step. Now, I think when you look at the whole picture and think, yes, but that one little step isn't going to solve all of my problems, I think the answer is, don't worry about it. Let's take one step. And when that step, which is not my habit, this is something new, this is a change, but when it becomes comfortable and when it becomes automatic, then maybe I'm ready for another step. And we can keep working our way forward. What a beautiful, hopeful message. And it's interesting when we're talking about our physical health, our mental, our emotional, our everything. And it often starts with, okay, let's work. on our stress. And in order to handle our stress, I cannot magically give you $1 million so that all of your debts are taken care of and all of your concerns, and money actually doesn't solve everything, by the way. But let's look at how we perceive what's going on. Can we reframe it a little bit and recognize that really it is okay? And that's quite lovely as well. Oh, thank you. That is lovely. So as we're talking about this, and we've talked about mindset, you have some key pillars to good health. Can we talk about those a little bit?
Yes. Well, back to something you said about how can one small action lead to the thing that I want to create in my life, whether it's good health or a lovely relationship or a peaceful, calm state. And it goes back to it's a very natural thing that happens when you take a step, you get moving. But it's that idea of the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Right. And this is old, wonderful, beautiful wisdom. So that's one thing we know, and we can trust the journey without knowing what step 3, 10, 25 is. All we have to do is think, plan for this next step, the one thing. And it's something that's very practical, something that we can do today and then tomorrow. So, yes, of course, the pillars of health. Well, we think of our nutrition, and what we consume and what we eat, really gives us our cells are what we eat. You are what you eat. Yes, your cells are being created, by the quality of the food. And now we know more and more about gut health and how it relates to mental health. And so we are not separate. Our food and what we take in is not separate from how we feel, our energy, our blood, our heart, our organs, our ways of thinking, our mood. And of course, this dictates everything, right? We go back to the relationships, to the stress, to the depression. And so the food is crucial. And I know that there's a lot of ways to eat out there, and there's a lot of quote unquote diets, but what they do have in common, if they're a good one, is they get rid of processed foods and they go to whole food eating. That whole food eating, the closest to the original form as possible. And if you are a carnivore or you're a vegan, the idea remains is whole food eating. So that's the first thing. And then of course we want to move. Move is a magic pill. Moving, exercise. It again, when we connect with what we know more and more about this, our movement to our gut health. Again, the gut health. They say that the gut's our second brain, but really we're finding it's the first. Right. It dictates how you think. It dictates if you have brain fog, if you're clear, what's going on in the quality of your ability to process and think and reason and all that. It really is. So it's really a powerful, beautiful center of our body. Movement affects this, and it's like our magic bullet. Movement is one of the best things we can do for our mood. It's one of the best things we can do to reduce stress. It's the best thing we can do for longevity. So we want to eat well and we want to have a movement practice. And there's a lot of ways we can do that, but from walking to heavy lifting to pickleball to yoga. But the idea is move and find something you enjoy, because that's another thing, is to connect and to have fun and to play. And we can do this in a movement practice. And this is also a place where we may belong, maybe to a tennis team or a yoga class or community or a Tai Chi, whatever. We can belong, and this connects also with our spirit and our need to belong, which raises that quality of life. Another one, kind of those 4 pillars, is sleep. Sleep is so important, and really prioritizing sleep, having good sleep hygiene, from turning off our lights, whether it's our TV or our phone, at a certain times, hour and a half to two before we go to bed, which is not what we typically do. Giving some space from your last meal until you go to bed, and kind of creating this wonderful little ritual around our sleep so we can set ourselves up to sleep well. So that's another thing. Getting connected, and I mentioned that just with the exercise. Having meaningful relationships is another one. And again, talk about quality of life. And when you look at the longevity and the blue zones, community and purpose is a huge pillar in all of them. So having a purpose, and a contribution. So I think those are the pillars. I mean, I could go on and on, but really I think those are those basic ones that if we can bring some attention and intention to those, we can move towards a really healthy state.
Wow, I have loved every single thing that you've said. I agree 100%, and I love it. Let's expand on a couple of those as we're looking at the one thing. So I would really like, if it's okay, to talk about, yeah, well, I'm going to do one at a time, but I want to talk about sleep hygiene a little bit. And I would also love to talk a little bit more about gut health. So is it okay? We'll start with sleep hygiene because you mentioned that last. It might be fresher in people's mind.
Sure.
Some people might not have heard that term before. So let's expand on that a little bit. What is sleep hygiene? And let's go through kind of an evening routine, something that's going to help me have better sleep and deeper sleep.
Well, okay. So the first sleep hygiene is kind of the ritual around preparing to sleep and preparing to sleep well. One of the things that we would start with is having our last meal or even a snack a couple hours before we go to bed. So that would be in even pre-preparation of our sleep hygiene routine. So we're not going just eating and then plopping into bed. What you could do is eat and then go for a walk, which is really, really good. And that's really good for your body too, even if it's a 5 or 10-minute walk. But we would kind of prepare with quieting our environment, reducing the light, the TV, the screen time, an hour or more before we go to bed. It might be a mineral bath just to kind of soak in. Our magnesium, our Epsom salt, those are so good and they relax the body. It might be a book or some meditative music while we're either preparing to go to bed or while we're in bed. Our dark room and a cool room. So these are the kind of things that help good quality sleep. Obviously, no stimulants, even past a certain time in the early afternoon or even noon also helps because there's a half-life to a lot of these caffeine products. And sleep is a big issue for a lot of people. A lot of people have to take sleep aids and sleep support. So if we got better at doing these simple things, our bodies, this is the rhythm they want to be in. We don't have to force it. It's just we have to allow it.
Ooh, isn't that interesting? As we're talking about sleep hygiene and creating kind of a ritual around going to sleep, and it's very normal to have a bedtime routine for children. Like it might be, we're going to take a bath, and now we're going to read a story, and now I'm going to tuck you in, and we're pretty good, or at least usually better with our children than we are with ourselves. We're going to go to bed at a certain time because we need to get up at a certain time, especially if there's school involved. And we know that tired kids are cranky kids. And so it feels normal and natural. And yet, somehow we think that as adults, we don't require that anymore. And so we go to bed whenever we feel like it, or wait as long as we want. We might bring our snacks to bed and our phone to bed and don't recognize that these actions that we're doing are affecting our quality and our quantity of sleep. And then we have stress on top of that. And so I think it's kind of back to basics of let's help our body do what it's supposed to do naturally. We have a circadian rhythm. Our bodies are intended to be awake, and then they're intended to sleep and refresh and renew, and then we awake and we start another cycle. But if we don't get that chance for our body and our mind to rest, then we have stress on top of stress on top of stress, and we're tired and we're fatigued, and we wonder why, and often don't recognize that those basic needs are really what our body needs. That's why they're called basic needs. So thank you for bringing that up and just helping us to remember. And if we go back to the what do I want? What do I need? You gave several lovely suggestions. And some people might think, ooh, a bath sounds so good. And someone else might say, oh, that book that I've been wanting to read. And other people are like, I don't care. But it's what works for you. So beautiful. We have kind of a smorgasbord of opportunities, of options, of things that help. And then let's pick the ones that work for us. And I'm hopefully most of our listeners are, oh, you had a comment, please.
Well, yes, as far as the circadian rhythm, yes, our body is naturally made for awake and for a sleep time. One of the things that can help that is waking up at the same time and going to bed at the same time, like you mentioned. And when we wake up is to get some good light from the outside, right? So that wakes us up. It brings our cortisol levels up, which is our awake hormone, right? And then in the evening, of course, we have our melatonin, and we are in this beautiful balanced cycle. So if we can honor that, actually getting out and getting morning light will help us sleep as well. The other thing I was going to mention is being careful about the last thing that you read or you put in your brain before you sleep, because our unconscious mind can sometimes rest in that. It'll just kind of take what was that last thing, and then whether you know it or not, in this unconscious slumber, your unconscious doesn't sleep, and so you can have this going on from the last thing you saw or you read or you thought about. So really being deliberate about a calming, positive, maybe a creative state of creating this thing that you want, and maybe that's the last thing that you think about, and so this subconscious will then kind of steep in that.
That comment that the unconscious doesn't sleep is something I haven't pondered before. It doesn't. And so I want something in there that's good, something that's positive. None of that negative thinking that, oh my gosh, look at my to-do list. I only got halfway through. I'm a failure. I can't do anything. I've got so much to do. Now, while I'm sleeping, my brain's going, okay, you're a failure. You haven't finished your to-do list. Da, 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 da. And I wake up feeling like, I'm a failure. I didn't finish my to-do list. Rather than having a fresh start of, today's a new day. I got a new to-do list and I can work on that. So thank you for that reminder. Good point. So you also mentioned gut health, and I have had other wonderful guests where we've talked about that before. It's important, and it is becoming more widely known. But I think there are still a lot of people who are like, who cares? How does this affect me? If I don't have a stomach ache, I don't want to think about my gut. So how does that affect our mental health? And how does that affect everything?
Oh my goodness. It's so incredible. We have a food system, unfortunately, that is really making us sick. So it's estimated that it says 75% of the food in our stores is highly processed. Okay. So what we know is most, if not all of us, are eating highly processed foods. Some are eating a lot or only highly processed foods. Okay. So in these processed foods, you have chemicals, you have dyes, you have, a lot of pesticides that are included when you don't have organic too. Some products are sprayed heavily. And so it really, I don't want to over exaggerate, but we really have a toxic food system. Okay. So here we are consuming this. Our body, this is not food. It's food like, but it's not food, not the food that our body was made to consume. And so slowly but surely, there's a lot of responses. We have our gut permeability that's impaired now. We have leaky gut, and they say most people have leaky gut, which then allows these food particles and such to go outside the gut, and it's not supposed to go. So we have quite a mess. We have a lot of chemicals and such, and then of course this gets leaked. But this causes inflammation. We're also feeding the bad bacteria, so we can have overgrowth of the kind of bacteria that we do not want, that makes us really inflamed, that makes us sick. And whatever you feed is going to grow. And if we're eating rather food that is food-like and not really whole food, that's the bacteria that we are growing. And we can have these overgrowths of bacteria that make us very, very sick. But we get into a lot of inflammation, which of course they say is also the base of all these diseases is inflammation. So we're getting our body in a really toxic, inflamed, unhealthy state. And so anything can happen there. But we're also, we create a lot of our hormones, or they originate in the gut. And so we have our serotonin and our deep dopamine. These are created in the gut. So we're having a lot of depression, anxiety, and they're tying this back to our diet in large part. And so, you just say, hey, just don't think that way. Just cheer up. Well, it's not so easy because it is a systemic issue. And we are in a toxic state. And because we don't have a tummy ache does not mean that we're having brain fog or we're having inability to create these hormones or our immune system is impaired. So our gut is everything.
Yay! I just want to cheer. I loved everything you said. I agree with everything you said. And this matters so much. And I'm so grateful that you brought in depression, because a lot of people are not aware that it comes from our gut, or at least that exacerbates whatever other issues we may be dealing with. And those feel-good chemicals, our serotonin, our dopamine, that we assume are started in our brain. Some are, but the majority actually comes from our gut. And so if we eat the good foods, then we can have those feel-good hormones. It's more than just feeling good after a meal. It's feeling good in our life.
That's right.
And so that just where we correct one, it corrects other things. I love that more and more people are aware of this. That just makes my heart rejoice, because depression stinks. And
Yes. I've seen studies where they have treated schizophrenia with healthy diets. And many people in this small study were relieved of almost all their symptoms. Everybody was relieved of some, but some were relieved of almost all of them. This is huge, right? Because if we are toxic, right, and then we continue to feed ourselves the thing that our body that cannot handle, and it may be a particular food, or it may be the chemicals in the food, a particular chemicals, or all of them, or we have kind of broken down our whole immune system, so it's all toxic. But however it happens, this is a huge deal when we can treat our mental health, not just depression, which is huge, but things like schizophrenia with the way we eat. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Isn't that amazing? So let's kind of put it back to where we were at the beginning. We're talking about how to improve every aspect of our well-being, our physical, our mental, our emotional, our social, and how we can look at what we want and take one small step to achieve that result. And then we've talked about some of the areas in our life, some of the pillars of wellness, what we can do. Well, I can maybe focus on nutrition, or maybe I could focus on my sleep. I can start somewhere. And then we've also talked about how big the results and the change can possibly be with what kinds of things making these one small step can do. And so I hope that our listeners feel hopeful, not overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, there's so much I got to do, but I can do one thing. And oh my gosh, is this worth it? Yes. Yes, it is. And you can do it.
Yes. And because we want to create sustainable change. And if we can do one thing at a time and create new behavior, one in one area of our life with one thing at a time, we can continue to add on. And we don't, like you said, we don't have to worry about step 5, 10, and we don't have to swallow the whole elephant. Yes, there may be a lot of things that you want to change in your life. And actually, often all those things that you want to change in your life make a lot of people paralyzed. They don't change anything because they think, I have too much. But if you just back out, just back, and you identify what you want, and then one thing you can start today, and the ball will get moving. And anything in any area that you do that is improvement will affect everything. So, and just trust that. Trust that. So I tell people, just trust the process. You don't have to understand it all right now, but just trust the process. And I encourage people to write down that one thing that they want to do and really bring it into their awareness, from whether it's drinking water, saying a prayer, to telling themselves all is well, having an apple a day, right, as part of their eating whole food, whatever it is. So doable, but write it down. Get your environment that supports it. Maybe it's stick them on your computer, or you write on your mirror, or you have a bowl of apples on your counter, but get your environment to support that. Ask for support you need, and then connect and acknowledge what you're doing. Because when you acknowledge, I'm doing it, I'm eating an apple a day, I'm actually doing it. Good. We celebrate that. It's part of the reward system that changes our behavior and, our desire. And the reward of the atta girl, I did it, is part of also a little dopamine hit, which again, is that reward repeat. So that's kind of how I teach the how to do these new behaviors. And we don't have to focus on what we don't want. We can crowd out with what we do want. And that's where we bring our intention and our focus.
This makes me so happy. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Well, one of my messages, working with so many different people who have tried a lot of things, and I think it can be really fatiguing in one's soul when they've tried and they've quote unquote failed. And one is to keep it really simple, but grace. And that's grace is just be kind to yourself. Just be kind to yourself. If a baby was walking and they took 5 steps and they fell, we wouldn't say, oh my gosh, how come you didn't do 10? We would say, yay, you did 5. And we'd celebrate the little, small, tiny stages of growth. And that's what we have to do with ourselves, especially when we are bringing in new behavior and trying to replace behavior that we have been practicing for years and decades, that has had a really important place of comfort or ritual or whatever it might be. And so just be kind and graceful to yourself, because we're all works in progress and we don't have to do it perfectly. So that's my overall message is start with one and find grace in all of it.
Wow, that feels so good. It feels so hopeful. It feels so, I can do this. Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing this today.
You're welcome.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. He said, "It is health that is the real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver." Today, I invite our listeners to enjoy the wealth of being healthy. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the Free Stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.